I thought returning to my grandparents' old lakeside cabin would be my escape from the chaos of city life. After losing my job and going through a messy breakup, I needed somewhere quiet to rebuild myself. What I didn't expect was to walk straight into a war zone controlled by the most power-hungry woman I've ever encountered. Let me tell you about Dorothy Brennan, the self-proclaimed queen of Pineview Lake community. Picture this. A woman in her early 60s with perfectly coiffed silver hair, always dressed like she's heading to a country club board meeting. Even when she's just checking mailboxes, she had this way of looking at you like you were something unpleasant. She'd stepped in. I'd been at the cabin for exactly 3 days when she showed up. I was sitting on the dock, finally feeling some peace, when I heard these sharp footsteps on the gravel driveway. I turned around to see Dorothy marching toward me with a clipboard. And let me tell you, nothing good ever comes from someone approaching you with a clipboard and that kind of determined stride. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice cutting through the morning stillness like nails on a chalkboard. "You must be the new resident. I'm Dorothy, HOA president of Pineview Lake Community, and we need to discuss some serious violations." Violations? I'd been there 3 days. I walked over trying to be neighborly. "Hi, I'm Jake. Actually, this is my grandparents' place. I don't care whose place it was," she interrupted, pulling out a measuring tape. "What I care about is that your vehicle is parked 2.3 feet too close to the property line. Your grass exceeds the maximum height of 3 inches, and that kayak is stored in direct violation of watercraft display regulations." Watched in disbelief as this woman actually got down on her hands and knees to measure my grass with a ruler. A ruler! She was like some kind of suburban dictator with a pocket calculator. "The fine structure is quite simple," she continued, scribbling on her clipboard. "Parking violation, $50. Grass height, $50. Improper watercraft storage, $75. That's $175 due within 10 business days. I tried to reason with her. "Look, Dorothy, I just inherited this place. I'm still figuring things out. Maybe we could work something out." Her eyes lit up with this predatory gleam. "Oh, you inherited it? Well then, you'll definitely need this." She pulled out what looked like a phone book, easily 200 pages thick. "This is our community handbook. Every rule, every regulation, every fine structure. I suggest you memorize it." As she handed me this massive book, she looked me up and down like I was some kind of vagrant. "And perhaps invest in some proper attire. Tank tops and flip-flops send the wrong message about our community standards." I stood there holding this ridiculous rule book, watching her walk away with her nose in the air, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Anger. Not the defeated kind I'd been carrying around, but righteous anger. Who was this woman to tell me how to live on my own property? That night, I started flipping through her rule book, and it was insane. There were regulations on everything. What color flowers you could plant, the exact angle your American flag had to hang, even specifications for doormat thickness. But something caught my attention. Every few pages, there were references to original charters signed by HOA President Robert Mills, 1985 Robert Mills, Bob. I remembered my grandfather mentioning a Bob who used to organize the neighborhood barbecues. But when I mentioned this to Dorothy, her whole demeanor changed. Her face went white, and she quickly changed the subject. That reaction stuck with me. The next morning, I decided to do some digging. I walked down to Harold's place. He was this sweet old guy who'd been neighbors with my grandparents for decades. When I asked him about the HOA and Bob Mills, Harold got this troubled look. "Jake," he said quietly, "there's something you should know. Bob Mills died in 2018. The thing is, Dorothy started enforcing these HOA rules about 6 months after his funeral. Before that, we were just neighbors who looked out for each other." My blood ran cold. "Harold, did Bob Mills actually start an HOA? Harold shook his head slowly. "Not that I remember. Bob was just a guy who liked organizing block parties. Dorothy showed up to his funeral with all these papers, claiming she was his successor. Most of us were too grief-stricken to question it. That afternoon, I drove to the county records office. What I found there changed everything. First, I discovered that my grandparents had signed something called a property independence clause back in 1952, specifically exempting their land from any future homeowners associations. But more importantly, there was no record of any HOA ever being legally established for Pineview Lake community. No incorporation papers, no board elections, no legal charter. Dorothy had been running a fake HOA for almost 6 years, drove home with copies of every document, my hands shaking with excitement and rage. Dorothy was in my driveway when I pulled up, measuring something else with her tape measure. "You're 3 minutes late returning from your outing," she announced. "Residents must inform the HOA president of any absence exceeding 4 hours. That's a $25 fine." I got out of my car with the biggest smile. "Actually, Dorothy, I have some interesting news. I'm legally exempt from your HOA." Her face went red. "That's impossible." "Every property in this community is subject to HOA rules that don't actually exist," I finished. "Because this HOA was never legally incorporated." She started sputtering, but I kept going. "I've got the county records right here. No incorporation, no legal charter, no elected board. You've been collecting money and fining people based on absolutely nothing." That's when Dorothy lost it completely. She started screaming about how I was threatening her, how I was dangerous, how the community needed protection from people like me. Before I knew it, she had her phone out and was dialing 911. 911? "Yes, I need police immediately. There's a man threatening me and my authority as HOA president. He's being verbally abusive and I fear for my safety." I almost laughed. Here I was, standing in my own driveway with legal documents, and she was claiming I was threatening her. But you know what? I realized this was actually perfect. The police were coming, and I had everything I needed to expose her. When Officers Martinez and Thompson arrived 6 minutes later, Dorothy immediately launched into this dramatic performance about how I was undermining community, safety, and threatening established authority. She was practically in tears, claiming I'd made her fear for her life. Officer Martinez listened patiently, then turned to me. "Sir, can you tell us your side?" I handed him the county records. "Absolutely. Dorothy has been running a fake HOA for 6 years. These documents show that not only is my property exempt, but there's no legal homeowners association here at all." You should have seen Dorothy's face as Officer Martinez read through the papers. Her whole power trip just deflated like a punctured balloon. "Ma'am," Officer Thompson said gently, "these documents appear to be legitimate. Are you saying you've been collecting fees and issuing fines without proper legal authority?" Dorothy tried to backpedal, claiming she had documents at home, that it was all a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. The officers advised her about the potential legal consequences of impersonating an authority figure, and left with a promise to follow up, but I wasn't done. Those 6 minutes while we waited for the police had given me time to think, and I realized this was bigger than just Dorothy's fake HOA. If she'd been doing this for 6 years, how many people had she scammed? I spent the next week making calls, first to the county attorney's office, then to a lawyer friend who specialized in property law, and finally to every neighbor I could find. What we uncovered was shocking. Dorothy had collected over $80,000 in fake fines and fees over 6 years. She'd used forged signatures from deceased residents to create false documentation. She'd even been taking a salary as HOA president, paying herself with money she'd stolen from the community. We called an emergency community meeting. Dorothy showed up with her clipboard and her rule book, still trying to maintain control. But when I presented the evidence, the county records, the forged signatures, the financial records showing where our money had gone, the room erupted. Mrs. Chen, who'd been fined $300 for painting her fence the wrong shade of white, stood up and demanded her money back. Tom Rodriguez, who'd paid $500 in assessment fees, was furious. One by one, neighbors shared their stories of Dorothy's tyranny. The vote was unanimous. Dissolve the fake HOA immediately and pursue legal action against Dorothy. 3 weeks later, Dorothy's house went up for sale. Turns out she'd mortgaged it to fund her lifestyle, and with the legal fees piling up, she couldn't afford to stay. The community pooled our resources and bought it at auction for about half its market value. Today, Dorothy's old house is our community center, and her perfectly manicured front yard is a vegetable garden that everyone shares. We still look out for each other. We just do it like neighbors, not subjects of some wannabe dictator. As for Dorothy, last I heard she moved 3 states away, probably looking for a new community to terrorize. But here at Pineview Lake, we're finally free to live our lives without measuring tapes and clipboards. Sometimes. The best revenge is just proving that bullies only have the power we give them. And once you take that power away, they're just sad people with too much time on their hands and not enough love in their hearts. The lake is peaceful again, just like my grandparents intended. And every morning when I sit on that dock with my coffee, I smile knowing that sometimes David really does beat Goliath, especially when Goliath turns out to be nothing but hot air and forged paperwork.